So Dr. Levin is currently the Samuel Candler Dobbs Professor of Biology at Emory University. He received both his bachelor's degree and his PhD from the University of Michigan. And much or more recently than that was inducted in the National Academy of Science in 2012. And Dr. Levin is a leader in combining mathematical modeling and computer simulations alongside experimental data, as Lauren had mentioned, to study the evolutionary biology of bacteria and their viruses. And his work in this field has really been seminal to countless researchers in the field, and including my own research, and contributed to my dissertation thinking. So applying his theory in ecology and evolution to applications in medicine has become a more common theme in his work, and some of his health questions his lab addresses now include the pharmacodynamics of antibiotics and the within host population and evolutionary dynamics of bacterial infections and their treatment with antibiotics, alongside a recent focus on understanding the CRISPR-Cas system. So we're really excited to have him here today to discuss, I believe, alongside a few other things, the post-vaccine epidemiology of SARS-CoV-2. So I'll let him take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Spence. I love the idea of seeing those skis behind you in Austin. I hope you all did well with your families and houses, and that, what a horror. I mean, it's a good thing that we no longer have to worry about, or Trump told us we no longer have to worry about global warming, among other things. So I'm going to talk about, okay, so I'm going to start this slideshow. Is that working for everybody?
Yeah,
okay.
We can see it.
All right. So I'm going to talk about non-specific vaccines and concerns about the specific vaccines. So the overview, I'm going to talk about non-specific vaccines and the phenomenon of trained immunity. And I'll talk about international variation in the incidence of COVID-19. It's really impressive, and I think very informative. A model, I'm going to give a model of epidemiology of SARS with predicted effects if we have incomplete immunity, which is some concern, and with imperfect vaccines. I'll say a few things about super spreading and rapid testing, and then I'm going to really, hopefully, as a form of discussion, we'll discuss preparing for the vaccine epidemiology of SARS-CoV-2, which is what you guys do. And I do have an agenda to convince you all about the need to prepare for the post-vaccine epidemiology and get you into the modeling, planning, and publicizing case. That is, that we could write papers for each other and be flattering each other. But I think in this case, people like Lauren have been doing what's necessary to get it out to the public. This is non-specific vaccines and trained immunity. The ideal's been around for a while. Now, the BCG vaccine wasn't used in this country because people would then turn positive for tuberculosis. But if you look at these data, this is from I really strongly recommend this YouTube by Netta, who's the main honcho in this business. And that is, if you look at BCG, very few deaths due to tuberculosis, but the vaccinated people have a much higher rate of survival. And this is a more recent paper. The rate of upper respiratory is lower in the BCG group than either the placebo group or so that non-specific vaccines, taking a vaccine for, say, tuberculosis reduces the likelihood of your having severe morbidity and mortality due to other infections. This is a more recent observation and specific for COVID-19. This is a study, and I've given the reference, is where they looked at the relationship between mumps antibody titer, and the response and COVID-19. And as you could see, with a higher mumps titer, meaning due to vaccines, nobody's getting mumps anymore. And you could see it is certainly reducing the severity. So this is just taking this. Now, let me say a couple things about this, and probably the reason Lauren suggested I talk about it. About, I'd say maybe almost 2 months ago, month and a half ago, I was talking to a colleague, and he mentioned a physician. He's telling his family to take the MMR vaccine. This is before readily available to take the COVID-19 vaccine. And he was saying so in part because of these data. That is that you by boosting your mumps and titer, you're reducing the likelihood of morbidity and mortality due to COVID-19. And the question is why? And I'm going to not get into much detail in that it requires more biology than I really like, but the answer ultimately comes down to we have this tradition of separating the innate and adaptive immune system, and that's artificial. And the general assumption was that the innate immune system had no memory, but what the whole idea of trained immunity is that if you get, say, a polio vaccine, or it has to be a live vaccine, it can't be a killed vaccine. You boost the secondary innate immune system, and will reduce the likelihood, he thinks, the transmission, but certainly the mortality and morbidity. And I could go on about it, but I can't but for a bunch of reasons, I'm not going to go on about it. First of all, you can learn more about it from this video by Netta, who is the one that brought up the idea of trained immunity. Second, now that we have specific vaccines, trained immunity and vaccination for tuberculosis and measles, rubella, and mumps would be hard to justify in a way to protect us from infections with SARS-CoV-2. Although real, the non-specific vaccine in mitigating mortality is modest. It's not certainly modest. If you're 10% is certainly worthy, but it's worth more extensive study. And I think there is a lot more extensive study about that. But since we now have the specific vaccines, and the other thing is, finally, is that for you guys, I think it's more important to do what we could do. The modeling end of this is secondary to the clinical ends of it, to show that if it does have that effect. This is a tale of two countries. And I just got there's these wonderful sources of data. If you guys have a dearth of data, just get onto this website and you can't believe what's available. This is Australia, new cases per million, the United States, new cases per million. Notice the difference in scale. This goes all the way up to 25 cases. So the 22 cases per million was the highest in Australia. 750 was the highest in the United States. So look at this profound difference in this is starting in the, following it. Now, what they call cases is a little bit moot and may vary among nations. That is, if you're COVID plus and no symptoms, are you a case? If you and so it's not clear, and it's not, we'd have trouble with the database. But so the non-specific, I think you can learn more about the. That's I just finished. This is total cases per million, and I've put the United States in red. For a couple of reasons, but but anyways, what you can see is just how profoundly different. If we take China, look at what it is, less than 100-fold that of the United States. Taiwan, even better. The United States is worse than the world at large in cases, total cases per million. This is as of February 22nd. The deaths per million is also, it's a reflection of what we see. You barely see any for Taiwan, some for China, but the United States is once again leading the world, you know, make America great again type of thing. So I think it's really, I don't know, you know, I'll share the, you know, I'll send you these PowerPoints. So if you want this, you know, if you want to sit, if you don't have enough data, you could get it. And this is new cases per million. And I'm starting at 0.01. Remember, new deaths per million. And so we're certainly 100 times. This is on the 22nd of the month. This is when we're already on our way down. And we could see how the United States has done so relatively poorly, you know, and some countries, Spain is even doing worse than us now. Israel is doing worse than us now, but we're really leading the world in this thing. And the other thing that's really intriguing is the deaths per case. So that the United States is a little over about 0.18, about 1.8%. For China, it's nearly 40%, 50%. Why is that the case? Is it that we're that much better at handling the disease, or is China not reporting what they're only reporting those that are serious? So it may be a reporting thing, but it's interesting to look at the differences, deaths per case. So what I'm saying is that international variation in the incidence of COVID-19 can be attributed to the way countries dealt with the epidemiology. Remember, this was all before vaccines played any real role. So we're looking at the effects of the epidemiology, not effects of anything else, but epidemiology in terms of the differences. Three of the students in my course did this wonderful PowerPoint where I asked them to look at different groups of nations, where they looked at the data, then they looked at what the nations are doing. And I'll share this student back paper. I mean, I'd hate to say it, but COVID-19 really captures the class. I'm teaching a course called Biology for the People, so we're free about it. And these kids have been doing such a great job of asking them specific questions. And I have a class of one, but I will send you all this thing, which is this. It'll convince you just how important what epidemiology is doing. Now, these are people these are my heroes, Bob May and Roy Anderson. Bob died in April, and in this presentation, and much of what we're thinking of really can be what Bob showed as the virtues of simple models of the epidemiology of infectious disease and ecology in general. The idea of simple, realistic, but not precise models, which was, and Bob May, you know, pretty much the antecedent of everything you've seen. These are the people that are in the game right now. Mark, Carl, Lauren, Rich, Lona Simonson was a former student of mine, and so these are some of the people that I'm just, my role in this has been more pedagogical. That is, so, and this is Michael Minner, who I'll say more things about also from Emory. And Caroline Buckey wrote a wonderful piece in the New England Journal of Medicine about why these simple models, you know, and you have people like the group in Washington making projections and then telling everybody what to do when the projections occur. And what is really strikes me when I look at the ups and downs, when it's on its way down, people say, let's open things up. And when it's on its way up, they say, let's close things down. And that seems to be the policy. Totally off the freaking wall. I mean, it's certainly not really considering the epidemiology. Now, this is a model that I made mostly for pedagogical reasons. And what it is a model where I have people that are mildly infected, but asymptomatic, the initial phase of the infection, then those that have potentially some symptoms, and these are the seriously ill, and people either die of the disease or they recover. And there's a sort of natural death rate. What I'm assuming with the vaccine is that's a whole other population, a subpopulation vaccinated. And there are a couple things about that population. The model allows for that population to transmit the infection to some extent. And the other thing is the vaccine may fail a little bit. That is, vaccinated people may enter this other game. So that's what I'm assuming. So we have a group of people who are vaccinated as a separate compartment in the model. And they will be vaccinated for, say, 100 days. You know, I'm clearly making up parameters, but I think it will illustrate what we're going to be seeing. So this is basically the standard compartment model where I've put in vaccines and I've separated the two kinds of illness, okay? These are the definitions of the parameters. And what I'm going to assume is that natural death rate is 75 years, hopefully longer. But anyways, this is per day. Additional death rate for mildly symptomatic is 2 in 10,000. Initial death rate is 5 in 1,000 for seriously symptomatic, meaning if you're symptomatic for 10 days, then there's about a 5% chance of dying. Then I have transition rates of 0.1 per day between, so that a certain fraction of IM will turn into IS. And so then I'm also assuming a fraction of the susceptible population is vaccinated. So that we have 80% vaccinated. And then we can convert all of these things based on assumptions about the R0. So what I'm assuming in this kind of model is that the R0 is a property of your state. That is, if you're mildly infected, you have a particular R0. And so from the R0 and the total number in the population, which I'm assuming is 100,000, we're able to look at the transmission rates between the different so that we're assuming that R0 is a property of the state you're in, so that if you're seriously infected, you have a particular R0. Now, this is something that I think is worth considering, and something we really have to discuss that a bit, is that if we look at, if there's a complete immunity, what'll happen is the infection will be lost, and the cumulative death rate will not increase. It'll just if there's some partial immunity, then we're not going to lose the infection. And if there's even more partial immunity, we're going to sustain the infection. So that if there's partial immunity, which looks like that is going to be the case, we're not going to get rid of SARS-CoV-2. And I think, so if immunity is less complete, the disease will be sustained and become endemic, like an influenza. The number of seriously ill will be greater if the term of immunity is shorter, that is, gamma is larger. Now let's look at vaccination. It's an amazing achievement. I think we all have to really step back and realize that in less than a year, they got this vaccine doing and using a protocol that really was, you know, I mean, if the kind of thing you would be proud to describe to your class about mRNA. You know, I'm now vaccinated. I could hear my ribosomes asking who these RNAs are from, but doing their job anyhow. So the big thing was not only the messenger RNA, but delivering it so that it's not. And it's an amazing achievement, but raises certain concerns. There's evidence for safety and efficacy, but it's not clear how long-lasting these vaccines will be, and it's not clear whether vaccinated or recovered individuals will be transmitting, or really how much they will be transmitting. So big questions about the vaccine remain. So the big experiment, and we could think of it as an experiment, is just starting. We're really just getting into the case of the vaccine. Now, if we assume the vaccinated can be continually infected, may be able to, at a rate Z per day, enter the I state from which they can progress to the disease. We assume that the rate of transmission from the vaccine is either 0, 0.01 or 0.05. That vaccinated individuals have an R naught of either 0, 0.01, or 0.05. And if we assume that people remain in the vaccinated, I should have said state for 100 days, and then they will enter the recovered state. And this is what you would get. If you have a perfect vaccine, and I'm starting the vaccination at a particular time when the infection is already somewhat established in the population. So that's why they're all starting at this point. In the absence of vaccine, we'd be producing 10 to the 5 cases, and we'd be producing so many deaths, given that we have a 5 based on that model. If 50% of vaccinated will be so much less, and if we 80% of vaccinated, you could show R naught's going to go down less than 1. So that R naught, so that with enough vaccine, we can in fact clear eliminate the infection. On the other hand, if the vaccine isn't perfect, so this is the perfect vaccine. Here we have a 0.1 R naught for vaccinated individuals and a rate of transition of 0.001 to. Then what you see happening is it's going to continue to increase. That is to say that if the vaccine is imperfect, the prediction is that it's going to be better than no vaccine, substantially better, but certainly not where we would want to be. So this question of how much transmission there is from the vaccine is really, really critical, and how leaky the vaccine is. You know, we say 95% and things like. So if immunity is complete, we can eliminate the disease. If immunity is complete and a sufficient fraction, we could eliminate it. If the vaccine is not completely effective, a vaccine can starkly reduce the incidence of infection and mortality, but it will not eliminate the disease. So that's, that's the bummer part. These are Israeli data, and I think we should all be following what's happening in Israel in this case. I think they should have vaccinated the Palestinians too. I have political issues with it, but now more than 50% of the population is doubly vaccinated. And so that's the experiment. We'll probably be there maybe this summer if we get that far. So what's happening in Israel is going to be very telling for all of us. And they're doing the work. They're really, I think that they made a deal with the vaccine companies to provide all the data, and they have a very organized and established system. If, however, you look at, say, this was about a couple of weeks ago, Israel has been doing worse than the United States in cases per million. So that cases per day. So Israel hasn't been all that good in terms of handling the vaccine from handling the infection from an epidemiological perspective. They've been no better than we are. But now they have the vaccine, and there have been a few papers, most of them in medRxiv. It's sort of interesting with medRxiv. I mean, that's, the New York Times and medRxiv is where we're getting our information about this. So vaccine reduces the time, and there's a paper by Roy Kashoni's group, and reduces the titer by a factor of about 4 in the nasal passages. And my colleagues, Mark Lipsich and Carlos Del Rio, certainly think that's going to be significant in reducing the likelihood of transmission. And then there was a recent paper by Shattuck and all, which suggests that even the single dose is being effective. So far, so good. Things are looking positive, that the vaccine is going to be doing its thing. But as I said, there are these questions that have yet to be resolved. Now, I just want to say a few things about super spreading. What I did, this is the same kind of model, but we have 2 kinds of infected individuals, those that are transmitting at one rate and those that are transmitting at another rate. I've eliminated the vaccine. So we have those that can transmit at a higher or lower rate. So if this one is transmitting at a higher rate, then they would be the super spreaders. And so we have the model with super spreaders and so on. And then these are the parameters, and this is the model. Now, this is somebody, they're impeaching him for their thing on Congress, which is a freaking horror. But I think, I think a lot of where we are now is a consequence of his not doing the right thing. With super spreaders, you could see that is if we have different likelihoods, amounts of super spreading, we're assuming the R0 of super spreaders is 6 and the R0 of the population at large. And this is the herd immunity threshold where it peaks. You could see that that if we have, that is, if the fraction of the population that's super spreaders is high, then we're going to have this really serious, it's just going to be that much more. So that even though the fraction of super spreaders is only 3%, it's going to be profoundly affecting the dynamics. On the other hand, if so quarantining, that is, if in fact we take the people that are positive and we quarantine them, and we assume an R0 of 8.8, then you can see that quarantining will basically reduce. Now, there's a few implications of this. I think by identifying COVID individuals and quarantining, infections can be doubtlessly markedly reduced. There's a paper one of the students in my class just sent me from a study in Slovakia showing that this kind of thing really works. That is to say, rapid testing, antigen testing, and so on. And the hero of that has been Michael Minna. There's a few things I really, Michael called the other day and we were talking about it, and he told me that the biggest issue is that nobody in the establishment that really makes these decisions is going in the direction of that. It's hard to believe they're not reading our modeling papers. And Michael has made a major effort to bring it out to the public. There's also this amazing undergraduate course. If you really want to learn about SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, there's a course at MIT that I just followed just as if I was a student and feeling proud to be there. Michael gave one of the talks, as did Fauci, as did David Baltimore. And so I really recommend that to everybody if you want to brush up on the epidemiology on COVID-19. So what can we anticipate and what can we do? There's no question that as the number of people vaccinated increases, there will be a great deal of pressure to relax social distancing, mask wearing, opening venues for social interactions like restaurants and bars. We already see that. We see a slight decline in the incidence, and restaurants and bars are being opened up. And the pressure's clearly understandable, economically, personally, and so on. But I think, and this is what I think we are in a position to do, to develop protocols for testing, contact tracing, and social distancing that minimize the number of people quarantined and the term of these quarantines. And then we really want to promote that. So what I'm saying, this is, I think, for all of us who do the modeling, this is a direction we should be going, working out ways of where there's some testing, where people stay home when they're tested, and how long they have to. I mean, the rapid tests are somewhat, you get false positives and false negatives. But a false negative is a serious case, but a false positive isn't. So if you stayed home a couple of days. So I think it's a matter of us really sitting down and saying our role is to design a way to do this rapid testing that is going to optimize the likelihood of minimize the numbers of infections, and at the same time, so that instead of just sort of following up and down and opening things like that, people get tested. If they're positive, they stay home and then test themselves again if they're negative that time. So we have to really, I think, look at that as an epidemiological problem, and maybe more agent-based modeling. I don't particularly like that, but whatever it is, I think we have to take ourselves we're the ones that are responsible. That is, we're not going to expect that. And, and as Michael says, that, they're not really listening very much. The president came out and said that they are getting 60 million rapid tests that are soon going to be available, like this summer. 60 million. Just think about it. We need about an order of magnitude more of those rapid tests. 60 million is going to be trivial. So we want to be able, the idea is just that, you start your day, have a cup of coffee, spit onto a piece of paper and find out if you're COVID plus or COVID negative, and then just plan your day accordingly. And I think that's the direction to go. And this is really opening it up for the talk, for, I hope, a conversation with all of you. Okay, so I just stopped screen sharing. So I think it's really up to us. We're the ones that are on the front line this way, and we can be on the front line staying at home, which is where we have the privilege of doing so. I don't know whether I sent you. There's a wonderful poem by Jericho Brown. I'll send it to Lauren, and she could distribute it. About who's really on the front line. It's a beautiful. Lauren, did you hear the poem? Did you?
I saw the poem. I'll share it, but resend it to me, and I'll send it around. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's not that it's probably a colleague at Emory who I don't know, but it really captures, the people in the supermarkets who are really on the front line and getting paid almost nothing, and how privileged we really are. But I want to really listen to you guys and see where we're going and where you're going.